Moadim L'Simcha, welcome. Tonight's Shiur, sponsored L'ilui Nishmat, Chaim ben Avraham Shmarihu, Lori and my grandpa Chaim Kilson, Zichrono Livracha. And I think he would have enjoyed Gemara Shiur. I know he enjoyed Gemara Shiur. He would have enjoyed this subject, which we're up to tonight. Perek Lulav HaGazul opens a new chapter, literally, but also figuratively, in as much as Perek Aleph and Perek Bet focused on the Sukka. Now we're going to focus on the Daled Minim. All of Perek Gimel and part of Perek Daled are focused on the Daled Minim, aspects related to the Daled Minim, and the kiyum of the mitzvot surrounding them. Before we even open the Perek, we need to do two things. First, we need to look at the actual pasuk in the Torah and remind ourselves what it is and what it means. I'm putting it on the screen so everyone can see it. It's, of course, well known to everyone here. We just read it in Shul just a couple of days ago. Here it is. All right, from the 23rd chapter of Sefer Vayikra. But I'm not just telling you this so you'll remember, oh, by the way, it's in the Torah. The sequence here is going to matter. L'kachtem lachem, take for yourself. Bayom HaRishon, on the first day, pre-Eitz Hadar, that is the etrog. Kapot Tmarim, the Lulav. Vanaf Eitz Avot, the Hadas. Va'arvei Nachal, the Arava. So you see that there is an order here. You know the men in Midrashim, not for tonight, favoring the etrog and moving in, let's say, orders of decreasing significance from the etrog on down. So that's the first part of the pasuk. Also to note, ulakata means actually picking it up physically, and that every person has to pick it up. Lachem, as we will see, most of us already know, but just to remind you, means you have to take for yourself, means, as we'll see now when we're learning this Mishnah and Gemara, it has to belong to you. It can't be someone else's. Hence, Perek Lulav HaGazul, HaGazul meaning it's a stolen Lulav, so that's not yours. Unlike a borrowed Lulav, which is something that someone has given me permission to use, though I have not taken ownership of it, a Lulav HaGazul is something that I have taken possession of against the will of the individual who rightly owns it. And the question is, do I take enough possession of it to be able to call it mine for the purpose of performing the mitzvah? I'm skipping now a lot of pieces. I'm looking at it from the perspective of the pasuk. Let's wait till we get to the Mishnah. So reserve your questions. You can start jotting them down. Bayom HaRishon does not mean it's a 7-day mitzvah. I mentioned tonight in the daily halacha, it's a 7-day mitzvah to sit in the sukkah all 7 days, right? Every time you go in the sukkah, performing the mitzvah. Yeah? So, Basukot Tishvu Shivat Yamim. It's 7 days. Saying Elisha Basukkah every time you go in and you eat a mazonot. Every time you make hamotzi. Right? How long is the mitzvah of the Daled Minim? Shat. Bayom HaRishon, take it on the first day. Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokeichem shivat yamim. Rejoice before Hashem your God for 7 days. Mishnah. Later on in our Perek, we're not going to get there tonight, that's for sure. But as you know, very often when you're learning a piece of Gemara, one of the hardest things for me when I was a beginner, I'm still a beginner in many respects, but when I was really a beginner, I just started, was I could not wrap my head around the idea that a Gemara is not written in a linear manner. Really, from the beginning of Shas, it presupposes that you know 10 concepts, the 5 concepts, before you even start, Meimatai Koren et Ashma Shel Arvid. You have to know all sorts of other things. This is true also of Perek Lulav HaGazul. So one of those things comes later on in the Perek, presupposing that you knew the Mishnah and all the Mishnayot. It's going to be germane to the Gemara. This is page 41a in the Mishnah. Originally, the mitzvah of taking the Daled Minim is a 7-day mitzvah only in one place. Where's that? Inside the Beit HaMikdash. and outside of Beit HaMikdash, it's a one-day mitzvah. Look with me, follow with me. The cursor goes down here to Rashi, Matnitin, B'mikdash Shiva. Sorry, it doesn't highlight well over here online in Hebrew books. So just, I'm down here, yeah, on this side. Kididar Shina B'Torat Konim, as we learn in the Medrash Halacha to Sefer Vayikra, Mi Usmachtim Lifnei Hashem Elokechem Shivat Yamim. Rejoice if you're before Hashem your God for 7 days. V'lo b'gvulin zayin yom. But not if you're in the boundary areas, meaning outside of the place of the Mikdash. That's not 7 days. When can you rejoice in front of Hashem your God for 7 days? Only if you're inside the place of the Mikdash. What happened? Tragedy struck, destruction. Mishacharav Beit HaMikdash, Hitkin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Sheyehei Lulav Nitl b'Medina, Shiv'ah. Once the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, one of the heroic acts of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was to expand the mitzvah for everybody for all 7 days, Zeicher LaMikdash, as a memorial to the Mikdash. So to sum up, we just learned two important pieces of information that we're going to need now as we're going through the Perek that is presupposed when you open Perek Lulav HaGazul. Number one, that the words of the pasuk already tell us that you have to have ownership over the Daled Minim, the 4 species. And the question is, what about intermediate phases of ownership, such as if you're borrowing, well, that's clearly not yours. You acknowledge that. So that's not your ownership. But when you steal something, again, you'll say, well, you shouldn't be stealing anything. That's correct. The Gemara is going to say that. But from a status perspective, just trying to analyze it without getting involved in the morality of it. Obviously, one should not steal. It's against the Torah. It's a Isser D'Oraita. But now you have something that is a stolen piece of property. It does not belong to you. Or by dint of grabbing onto it, have you now acquired ownership and now you can say it's yours? That's the first piece. And to number 1b is the fact that the order in the Torah is Etrog, Lulav, Hadas, Arava, right? Now, what's the Perek about? The Lulav. What happened to the Etrog? Why didn't it start with Etrog? It's the most important of them all, you would think. It's not my question. It's a question of Pnei Yehoshua. I'm going to come back to it in a minute. The second piece, and this will be crucial to understanding the beginning of the Gemara, is the fact that there was a shift. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai expanded the mitzvah. Obviously, he could not expand the mitzvah deoraita. That's only on one day, the first day. If you're outside of the Beit HaMikdash, if you're in the Beit HaMikdash, it could be all 7 days. He said, as a Zeicher LaMikdash, meaning it is of rabbinic stature, it's midirabanan, I expand the mitzvah for all 7 days, which will beg the question, and we'll see it's going to be right at the beginning of the Gemara, how much, when he says he's expanding the mitzvah, how much is he allowed to export from the basic mitzvah deoraita into the other days? Meaning, if we have a high standard for something on the first day, does it mean if he said, well, the rest of it's going to be D'Rabbanan, everything is on a par with how it was on day one? Or of necessity, since Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, a great gadol though he was, he can't just decide on his own, I'm going to be the guy who imports all of the, I'm going to load across all of the chumras from the first day onto the other 6 days. After all, it's a kiyum D'Rabbanan, the standard. Can you really hold it to exactly the same standard? It's a question. And I'm leaving that one open. We're going to come back to it when we get into the Gemara. Okay? Those two things I thought would be important to know before we get started. And really the first word, Lulav. We learned one word in the Mishnah now. Lulav. I'm opening the Mishnah. Lulav. Why Lulav? Why didn't it start with the etrog? It's natural it should start with the etrog. Look at Rashi, the first Rashi, Lulav HaGazul, the stolen Lulav. Lulav, Rashi wants you to know, in case you just landed and you never heard of a Lulav, Lulav Kaf Shel Tamarim. The Lulav refers to the willow branch. Excuse me, not the willow. Sorry, the palm branch, the palm frond. The Hadartani, Hadas, the Arava Bapi Nafshayu. Later on, we'll get to the Hadas and the Arava separately. On the face of it, say, if you don't know what a Lulav is, you have no business learning a Mishnah about Lulav HaGazul. Rashi says the Pnei Yeshua wanted to forestall the possibility that you would say that actually the word lulav here refers to a bundle of the lulav, hadassim, and aravot. Ergo, lulav here means just the lulav. Okay, that's good. That's one. But what about the etrog? So the Pnei Yeshua points out that the lulav, after all, is the object that grows the highest off the ground than any of the other elements. And while it's true from the perspective of the pasuk, it's the Pri Eitz Hadar, then kapot tmarim, then anafetz avot, then arvei nachal. When one thinks about the stature of these elements, even in the bundle, the tallest, most prominent one is the lulav. In fact, the bracha's syntax is asher kisham tzivanu al netilat lulav. And so he basically says what you have to think about, just to consider as you're opening this masachet, is in fact the idea that we're talking about. Rashi wants you to know that we're specifically focused on this one of the elements. We are going to learn that part of the issue here in this Mishnah and in this Gemara is the question of the way in which lulav is itself an extension of etrog. After all, the first four words here, lulav HaGazul, a stolen lulav, v'hayavesh, or a dried out lulav, pasul. Dried out lulav is pasul. It just says take kapot tmarim. It doesn't give you a standard, but what it has to look like. Which of the four species do we learn about a particular standard of how it has to look? The etrog. Says the Pnei Yeshua, this Mishnah already starts with the lulav because it itself, in terms of its standard, as far as the yavesh component, is derivative of the word hadar that appeared in that pasuk. In other words, when it mentioned, particularly regarding one of those elements, the first one, that it has to be Pri Eitz Hadar, the element of it being hadar means that it is beautiful, right? That standard does not just apply, it turns out, to the first element, but it is also that which teaches us something about elements 2, 3, and 4. And once we understand that, we appreciate why we wanted to start specifically with the lulav. Not only because of its prominence, it's the asher al tilat lulav, because it's actually the tallest, most imposing of them all, but actually also the idea that we're going to learn about the lulav as a hekesh from the world of etrog itself. And then you could ask the question, well, if that's true, at least start with etrog, set the standard, and move off of there. But the Pnei Yeshua reminds us of a shas principle. When something is mefurish in the Torah, it's explicit in the Torah, versus there is something that is derivative from the words of the Torah, the Tana will reach first for that which is derivative. After all, we're in the Torah Shabbal Peh. That which I could get directly from reading the pasuk, that is not the highest priority. First is what is the most important derivative element, and therefore the order is lulav, hadas, arava. Of course, we're going to talk about etrog as well. It's coming up, but the point of it being spread out and that we start with lulav, says the Pnei Yeshua. That's why Rashi wanted you to know it's talking not about a bundle, but about one element. Let me stop here for questions and comments. And we're 4 words in, and we haven't skimmed the surface yet. We're skimming the surface still. Go ahead.
A question is the Pnei Yeshua addressing only the wording of the Mishnah or the bracha as well?
He's addressing the Mishnah, the wording of the Mishnah. He's marshaling the bracha syntax. The fact says, Asher Yisrael al netilat lulav. When I say al netilat dalad minim, the lulav is the most imposing of them all. It's the tallest. It's the highest, physically.
From the botanical point of view, the aravot are the most likely to go dry, not the lulav. The lulav may stay longer. We know this from what happened. And the next, the hadas, and then lulav, and their talk will last for many, many weeks. We know that. But he just addresses the lulav. So you think the lulav represents all 3, maybe?
It could be. But the idea that the lulav here is the one that's focused on first as opposed to last. Yeah? That it bumped etrog out of the way because of the reality of what it represents. Wow. Let's skim the surface together of the Mishnah. We'll just learn through the Mishnah. So we'll say we learned a few lines. And then I want to dive down right away in the Mishnah itself. And what does it mean that the Yavesh is already pasul? Let's just learn the Mishnah through. So Lulav HaGazul HaYavesh pasul. Stolen or desiccated. Both, no good. Then a series of status issues having to do with the Lulav as an object in terms of what it's slated for. Shel Asherah v'Shiur Hanidachat. The Asherah, remember, is a kind of idolatry where they worship a tree. So if it's made from the Asherah tree, or if it comes from a city that is slated for destruction, never happened. But it's a parsha in the Torah, described in Parshat Re'eh, about a town where all of the objects within it have to be destroyed. So this is before the destruction. You come across a beautiful date palm, you cut the palm frond, and you want to use it as your lulav, pasul. So that's the second line. Third line, nektam rosha, issues with the physical object that have destroyed its integrity. Nektam rosha, nifritzu alav, pasul. Nektam rosha, the top of it was lopped off. Nifritzu alav, the leaves became prutzim. They're detached. Nifradu alav, kosher. If the leaves become separated, that's still kosher. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Yagdenu milamala. You need to, according to Rabbi Yehuda, tie it at the top to prevent it from fanning out. Sine har habarzel ksherot, a particular type of brittle looking branch. Sine har habarzel. We'll see a picture of it in a moment. Sort of sticking out like a fork in a certain way. It sort of looks that way, and we'll see it in a bit. So those are kosher. Lulav sheish b'shlosha tvachim gedei l'na'anei bo kosher. Lulav minimally has to be, according to the Mishnah at least, 3 tvachim long, so that you will be able to wave it. You know, the nanuin that we do in Hallel is not just a nice thing. People want to, they're antsy. It's actually a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah d'Rabbanan, but a mitzvah of nanua. And it should be done during Hallel, ideally. And we'll see shortly, though, it doesn't mean 3. It really means more than 3, but okay. That's the Mishnah here, just uses the word 3. It has to have at least 3, so you can be minaneabo.
Rabbi?
Let's look at some pictures, because that clarifies and saves a lot of time of trying to unpack it. This is from the beautiful Masifta Gemara that I love so much. And here you have different pictures. Here's a dried out lulav. Yeah, it just notes that the Ravid thinks that it means that as long as it turned white, it lost its greenness. That would be good enough. The Torah paskins that way. And here we have different examples of what it could be. The dryness for Tosfot is not a color issue, but it's actually that it's falling apart. It means that the pieces, when you scratch your nail on it, it falls apart. So that's not going to be good. Next. Nektam Rosho is the top got lopped off. Yeah?
Yep.
Pretty obvious.
Yep.
Okay. But then there's another discussion of Nektam Rosho actually means the Tosfot that most of them got lopped off, but it wasn't literally cut off at the top. In the first case, the middle one just got chopped right off the top. But in the second rendering, maybe it really means that most of the leaves are missing the tops. The Bir Halacha here says, that's the Chavetz Chaim writes, the Mechaber is Moda, that if above there are 3 that are cut, it's done. The middle one is the main one. That's why when you go to the store, if you go into a store, you go to wherever your merchant is that you go to get your Daled Minim, they're always checking the middle one, because if the middle one is cracked off, it's finished. Nifritzu alav, Rashi, they're no longer attached to the spine. They're tied together, but they're not actually attached physically to the spine anymore. Rashi uses the example. In fact, he says it's like a broom. Like a broom has bristles that you tie to your. So you see a broom, so the top of it is tied and the bristles fan out. No good. Nifritzu olav. Won't work. Okay. Tosfot also point out that actually every leaf of a lulav is really doubled. That's not for now. It's going to take us too far afield, so I'm skipping it. Nifritzu olav, it was cracked off, right? So here we have nifritzu olav. Puzzle is not just where it was like totally broken off and you tied it on, but the Mishnah Brewer writes it even means where it's just hanging by a hair. Not good enough. Yeah, you hold it up and just plops off. That's not going to work. Next page. Much too much light over here. This was that it broke in half. It was literally cracked in half. The whole lulav. No good. Nifredu olive kasha. This does happen to many of us. It's attached, but it starts to spread apart on either side. Now, ideally, Rabbi Yehuda says that should not happen because you're supposed to tie it to prevent that from happening. That's what the kesherlach are on your lulav at the top. So you'll say, I don't need that. Throw it off. You need that. You should have it. Because Rabbi Yehuda. Here's his example. Rabbi Yehuda says, tie it on the top. Also down below for reasons we won't go into now. Here's the Tzine Harabarzo case we just saw. Yeah? So it's that the lulav has a section that pops out in the middle, and then it keeps going on the spine, and another section that comes out. Looks like two pitchforks lined up one next to the other. Okay? Tzine Harabarzo. Okay. I think that's all we have in the Mishnah to see.
Rabbi,
Okay,
can I ask a
that's
question?
we're not going to get to tonight. So skip. Yeah, skip all that. Okay, that's enough. Okay,
Can I
that
ask a
was the
question
mission.
about-
Everybody good?
Can I ask a question, Rabbi?
Yeah, by all means.
Yeah, back to the second line. Shall Asher shall ir nidachas puzzle. There's no havamina that anything from ir nidachas will survive. Got to destroy everything. So
It
why
was
do we
before it was
have
destroyed.
Hmm?
It was before it was destroyed.
Ah,
So you have this object. Now, you're not allowed, you have to destroy the object. Let's say you say, yeah, I'll destroy it next week. Does have to do it now? I'll do it after Sukkot. Or you use this lulav, and at the end of Sukkot, they say to you, you know that was like from an irani dachat, right? Yeah, but I held it in my hand. I could see it. So we're going to see there's going to be a discussion. The Gemara is going to explain why that's on the list and what the difference is between the Asher and the irani dachat. If you want to see, Rashi right here just points out a lulav has to be actually, in the end, not 3 tfachim, but actually 4 tfachim. Rashi says so in the Dibra Aman irani dachat. He points out that a lulav has to actually be 4 tfachim. And since it is omed l'sreifa, it's going to be burned, its shiur is reduced. We're going to learn a term later on, not tonight. Kitute mechtat shiure. It's as if from a halachic vantage point, it was cut down to, or shrunk down to being 1 tefach large. That's its size, even though it looks bigger. It lost its status as an object. Therefore, you can't use it. We'll see Asherah has another problem with it as well. Okay.
Rabbi?
Yeah, please.
So all of these things that are mentioned have to do with the actual lulav, except for HaGazul. Is there any mitzvah that is acceptable if it's in a state of HaGazul? And why would the Mishnah lump this in with things that are seemingly about the inherent quality of the lulav?
All
And is that going to be discovered by
asked.
the? Is that going to be covered by the?
This is the line of questioning of the Gemara. In fact,
Okay.
we're going to get into exactly this question.
Okay.
We might get.
But isn't there a concept of mitzvah baba avera?
Yeah, that's the sugya.
But that constitutes is what Mark is saying, isn't it?
Right. Right. But what Mark is asking is, if I understand the question correctly, one of these things is not like the other.
Right.
Yeah.
First thing, all of these things are about something wrong with the lulav that is something about its physical status, its halachic status. And then you get this thing like it's stolen. Well, can you use a stolen piece of matzah? A stolen sukkah?
Stolen
Right.
tefillin?
Fill-in? You know, where does the line come and go?
Right.
And that's going to be part of the discussion of the Gemara. We're going to learn about this concept of mitzvah haba ba'avera. Why was
Okay.
lulav particularly singled out? Is it something related to, and the reason, I'll say it this way. It's significantly attached to the world of lulav in as much as the Torah goes out of its way to say, "V'lekachtem lachem," it has to belong to you, right? Does that imply
Okay.
that if you steal tefillin, that's okay? You could use the tefillin and get a mitzvah with it? So that's the Gemara's discussion. It'll base itself on the world of lulav. But what I'm hoping to do is also show you applications outside of the world of lulav and to try to expand upon the definition of what it is that is wrong with the lulav HaGazul, aside from the moral issue, which obviously is there. But the issue of mitzvah haba ba'avera, you're doing the mitzvah through an avera, is very much on the marquee. But certainly, there are other questions just syntactically about this Mishnah. Mark, to expand on your question, I don't mean to defer it. The main question I am deferring because we have to get to that in the Gemara itself. That's what the Gemara is wondering. Like, what do you mean? Lulav HaGazul hustle? Obvious. You're a thief. Like, of course. You can't do a mitzvah with it. Isn't that obvious? That's the question. But if I was writing this Mishnah in my simpleton way, I would have written, here are the following things that could go wrong with your lulav that are about the object of the lulav.
Right.
Right? So I would have listed off like this. I would have said, lulav hayavesh, not puzzle. I would have said, lulav hayavesh, nektam rosho, nifritzu alav, nifridu alav, puzzle. Here's a list of things that if this is the status of your lulav, it's no good, right? That would be list number one. Number two, status problems with your lulav. Gazul, shela sheira, v'shela nidachat, puzzle. Right? There's nothing physically wrong with my stolen lulav. The object is beautiful. It looks wonderful. What's the problem? There's something about the history of it that is tainted it. The shela sheira, it's a beautiful lulav. 10 minutes ago, someone bowed down to it. It's not my problem. I picked up a branch and I want to use it for my mitzvah. What's it on me? No, there's a status on this object now. Shela irani dachat, it's slated for destruction. It doesn't exist. Rashi already told us that, so I'm willing to allow it in the court, if you will, even though it comes up later in the Gemara. It doesn't exist now. I'm holding it. Halachically, it's kitudei machtat shiur. It's like it's one tefach long. That's not long enough. It's not a good lulav. But that's totally not what the Mishnah did. It put the gazul and the yavesh in the same basket. It said that's puzzle. Basket one. Basket two, shel asher v'shel nidachat, puzzle. Nektam rosh nifritzu alav, puzzle. Then it gave you some cases of what's kosher. You follow what's going on here? So when you just look at the things of the Mishnah, you remind yourself, Mishnayot are never written in a happenstance manner. They're what's the word? Their brilliance, if you will, is baked into the syntax and the order, the syntax and the sequence. So sequence part of the syntax, but the way in which it is constructed is not just because a rhetorical flourish sounded good to say this is puzzle and that's puzzle and that's puzzle. It doesn't work that way, right? We're already seasoned veterans over here. So we have to ask, why are these things grouped with the other items? And particularly, headlining Lulav HaGazul seems a rather jarring thing. It makes for a very good title, The Case of the Stolen Lulav, but it's not the interest of Chazal, obviously. So when I say Lulav HaYavesh, V'shenektam Rosho, V'shnifritzu Olav, puzzle, right? HaGazul, Sheir, Shalom Nidachat, puzzle. And why would it be puzzle and puzzle? Because there's basket number one is about physical defects. Basket number two, halachic defects, status defects. That's not what happened. So that's part of the discourse of trying to understand why was the Mishnah organized the way in which it was. To get to that answer, we need to do a little more spade work. Look at Rashi on the words yavesh. When it says that a yavesh is puzzle. Sorry, let's read through Rashi actually. The first Rashi we did. Second Rashi, gazul, puzzle. V'lekachtem lachem ktiv mishel lachem. That's the pasuk we saw at the beginning tonight. Has to be yours. You have to own it. Yavesh, writes Rashi, deba'ina mitzvah mehuderet. It has to be a beautiful mitzvah. What's the pasuk to tell us that a lulav has to be beautiful?
לאלוקים וענווהו, huh?
זה כלי וענווהו, yeah, but that's
Really? I'm looking at the word. I'm looking at the pasuk over here. It seems pretty obvious to me. It's right here,
oh, pre-Eitz Hadar.
right? But is there a misprint in Rashi? That's not what Rashi wrote. Rashi chose another pasuk. Dichtiv ve'anvehu. Where's that pasuk from? Remember the song at the sea? Jewish people sing Zek Keli ve'anvehu. Elokei aviv v'ramenu. This is my God. I will beautify him. Milashon noi, like the noi in the Sukka, is ve'anvehu. Hitnaot. So what's going on over here? Rashi, you should have quoted the pasuk about Hidur from the pasuk about the etrog, but instead you reached for a general principle that is from Shirat Hayam. You hear the question? If you don't hear the question, we can't get to the answer.
Well,
That's not my question. This is Tosfot's question.
But pre-Eitz Hadar describes the etrog, not the lulav.
Ah, you're right, except for the question. Well, obviously, wait a second. Yes, and it sounds almost as if Rashi must think that it's limited to the etrog. Otherwise, why didn't Rashi save us a lot of agmat nefesh? Just say it's because of the etrog. That's not what he wrote.
Yeah, okay.
So if it's written that way, clearly Rashi doesn't think it came from the pasuk, from the middle of the world of Sukkot, but rather he thinks it's from a general Shas principle of hitna'al lefan of b'mitzvot. Now, you may think to yourself, well, it's very beautiful, but I mean, why is Rashi so convinced that this is actually a halachic principle? After all, it's from the song at the sea. The people were singing a beautiful song, and in the chorus of the song, they happened to mention that, this is my God, and I will beautify him, and many beautiful drushes that they were looking at the sky, that they had some kind of prophetic vision. They could see Hashem as if he was a warrior, right? So Likim and Rashi decided, no, there's a halachic principle of hitna'al lefanav b'mitzvot. But Rashi didn't make it up. Rashi knew the Gemara Masechet Shabbat. Look with me here. Zekeli, where am I here? Here. Titania, as we learn in a Braita, Zekeli v'anvehu, hitna'al lefanav b'mitzvot. Beautify before him through mitzvot. It doesn't translate exactly, but it means beautify the mitzvot. Aseh lefanav, Sukka na'eh, the Lulav na'eh. It's right here. 2 words. Understand? So that's where Rashi got the idea. Okay, but then it goes on. Shofar na'eh, tzitzit na'eh, Sefer Torah na'eh, right? It keeps giving you different examples. So the question is this a halachic requirement? And is this what we mean? That therefore, if it's dried out, it's not this? That's what Rashi seems to be saying. Tosfot disagreed. The Bali Tosfot here, the first Tosfot, Chav Tet Amud Bet, say it's very strange. The Gemara itself here in Masechet Sukkah does not reach for that pasuk. Rashi went out of his way to grab hold of this pasuk, and he has a leg upon which to stand because that's what the Gemara says in Masechet Shabbat. But even there, we're not entirely sure. You have to have a tzitzit noah. So let me ask you: Are there 20 things you need to know about? If the tzitzit get dried out, they're not good. Like you didn't wash them, so they're not. Maybe, but we don't. It doesn't seem. That seems to be. It's like that Gemara in Shabbat. I probably took off the screen too quickly. It's talking about the enhancement and beautification of mitzvot.
I mean,
not a standard of kosher or puzzle.
I mean, we spent a long time talking about the sukkah. We didn't say it had to be, that if it wasn't beautiful, it wasn't valid.
Good. Excellent example, right? So that's what Tosfot says. Sukkah never loved. These examples. Shofar nai. It doesn't say the shofar has to be I don't know what, this animal could be that animal. It doesn't say you have to put designs on it, etc. Right. A good example, Jeff, that was a great example. Sukka. We didn't say sukkah na'ed. If it's not a sukkah na'ed, it's not a kosher sukkah. You should beautify your mitzvot. There's a separate idea, like enhance your mitzvot. So it's a question, and it's not my question, it's Tosfot's question, but Tosfot didn't do it in a way of saying to Rashi, come on, is that really a mitzvah in and of itself? Instead, Tosfot said, when the Gemara will deal with this subject in depth, and we'll try to parse this topic on page 31a, look here with 29b, look in Tosfot. Let's do this Tosfot together. So Mefarish b'Gemara mishum de'itkash lulav la'etrog, dichtiv be hadar. In the Gemara, it will say that the reason why we care about dried out and desiccated lulavim as being a problem is because the lulav is connected. There's a hekesh between the lulav and the etrog. The fact that it says with regard to the etrog, hadar, is also true with regard to the lulav. It needs to be hadar. The Gemara says that. Those are the words I would have sort of highlighted. And it's kind of to Jeff's point from a moment ago. What does ve'anveo mean? L'chatchila, it should look nice. And if it doesn't, it's not a kosher sukkah. You built a little shanty out of, boards and they don't look good. No, it's a kosher sukkah. You may degrade. That's it. It doesn't have to be. L'chatchila, it's nicer. But okay. V'lo mifsal b'hachi. That's not going to destroy it. Kidemuchach, Perek kama, de amri rabbanan lulav mitzvah la'ogdo. Mishum shnamar zek keli ve'anveu. Page 11b. We learned this ages ago, 2 years ago at least. Chazal say it's a mitzvah to be ma'aged. What Rabbi Yehuda asked for here, to wrap it, to have the kusherlach. So everybody has a little basket. You put your lulav and etrog in the little basket. Unless you're Chabad, you follow the sheet of the Rambam. Everybody else puts it in, and that's already your eged. That basket has to be made out of lulav material, right? There was a shiloh this year. Can you wear gloves when you pick up the Daled Minim? And the answer was, you cannot, because the gloves, Rosh Weiss Paskin, the gloves would be a chatzitza. So we have to hold it directly. So how are you holding it directly if it's in the basket? So we'll come to it later on in this Perek, in fact, about Baltosi. We'll see. That's why those baskets, the little agate, it's actually made out of lulav material. It's made out of palm branches. The kushalach, same deal. So Tosfot would say, well, listen, the Rabbanan said it was a mitzvah la'ogdo, mishnamar zek keli ve'anveu. Lo ogdo, kasha, but if you fail to do that, still a kosher lulav. I'm on the narrow lines of Tosfot now. End of the line. V'ha yavesh tahacha ein lefarish kamo yavesh the Perek ein ma'amidin. Ditnan, the word yavesh here does not mean what it means in Masechet Avodah Zarah. There's a discussion, the sediment of the Nochrim Yaveshim Mutarim, that the sediment that's left over from the wine press from non-Jews who squeeze the grapes, that's permissible. After 12 months, it's called Yaveshim, they're dried out. That's not what this one is. With regard to the hadas is going to say, even if most of the leaves dried out, but there's three leaves on the stem next to each other that are still moist, that's kosher. Alma, therefore, the dryness has nothing to do with a period of time elapsing. Yavshut tehacha kimo yavshut ozen bechor. The Tanan Perek al elu mumin. Rabbi Yosef ben Amishulam Omer Yavesha ad shetehei nifrachet betziporim. Again, referencing the idea that the fingernail, if you scratched it and just fell off, that's the standard of yavesh you need. We saw before that the Ravid, and it's paskin this way by the Tur, says that dried out means that it lost its green color. It turned off-white. But Tosfot would have a much different standard. Theirs is when you flick it and it falls out, that with your fingernail, that's when it's no good. Tosfot disagree with Rashi. Tosfot maintain that we're dealing here with a situation of hadar. The Gemara itself says hadar. There's no reason why we should use zek keli ve'anveu, since he says, Tosfot say, not he, they say, that actually zek keli ve'anveu, whenever it is applied, really refers to a situation of a lechatchila, failing which you haven't met that gold standard, but it's not going to actually destroy the integrity of the mitzvah altogether. Machloket Rashi and Tosfot. Various achronim tried to answer this conflict between Rashi and Tosfot. Try to figure out what's Rashi really saying. What is the nature of his statement? I have a bunch of different achronim to present. I'm just going to skip to the one that I've skipped to before, but I think it'll be helpful, and that is from one of my new favorite svarim, the Rishimot Shiurim. We did so much from the Sefer already. Should buy a copy for everybody to have. I'm putting it up on the screen. This is from the Rishimot Shiurim of Rav Yosef Dovalevi Soloveitchik, written up by Rav Herschel Reichman. So he actually dealt with exactly this question. He quotes Rashi, right? It has to be mitzvah mehudaret, and if it's yavesh, it's no good. Ad kan lashono. Look at Tosfot. You see the question, right? He questioned Rashi on two counts. Aleph. Since the whole point of that's to look nice only lechatchila, so lama yifasel yavesh b'diavad. Why is it that yavesh is pasul? It says so in the pasuk. By the way, hanging all over all of this is why is it Lulav HaGazul v'yavesh pasul? Like I asked before, the sequence of the Mishnah. We'll see if we get that far tonight. Bet the Gemara Mefurish. The Gemara is clear in Masechet Sukka on page 31a that Lulav yavesh is pasul. It tells you why. Mishum da'atkish lulav la'etrog. Ma'etrog by hadar, af lulav by hadar. That's a direct quote from the Gemara, page 31a in our chapter. Vein zechalot psul vanvehu. There's nothing to do with vanvehu. But tzarachin b'bir shita tov. We have to really understand what was Rashi thinking. Now, again, you could have argued, yeah, just look at the Gemara Masechet Shabbat. It actually says here's a list of things that have the requirement that they be beautiful. But as Jeff pointed out, yeah, that was true for Sukkah, but we already saw the Sukkah, that wasn't always the case for a Sukkah, and nobody said your Sukkah is not kosher if it's not beautiful, as long as it meets the basic halachic standards. 7 tfachim by 7 tfachim, 10 tfachim high, schach, that's gidulei karka, it's not shayach l'tuma, right? That's talush, all those things. We learned very much in depth the last number of years. V'nira levara yisod din zeki levanveyu, v'v'kach l'taretz et shitat Rashi atmuha. Here's how I'm going to explain Rashi, he says. The Hinim Masechet Gittin, Ita. Shakotev and Hashem b'Sefer Torah bli kavanat lishma. You know, when a sofer writes a Sefer Torah, every single time they write God's name, every time they write Yud Kei Vav Kei, they have to say L'Shem Kedushat Sefer Torah every time they write it. So they make sure that they have the right kind of kavana as they're writing it. Yeah. This person didn't. They wrote a word, the Shem Hashem, without the kavana of it being Lishma. The Rabbi Yehuda, Mavir alav kol musum mekadsho. Rabbi Yehuda says now say l'shem sefer kedushat sefer Torah, and with the stylus press on the letters. The letters are written, so you're not rewriting the letters. You can't erase God's name, right? But you can press on the letters. You're making an imprint. You're sanctifying it that way. Rabbanan sovrim shah sefer pasul she'ein shem zeh min amuvchar. The Chachamim say that sefer Torah is not kosher because this sefer is not min hamuvchar. It's not, doesn't look nice anymore. Rav Acha bar Yaakov, Masbirat shtatam dehem sovrim, deba'inan, zeh keli vanveu veleka. Oh, this Gemara is an example right here of the requirement of zeh keli vanveu as a requirement whose failure to achieve its standard renders the Sefer Torah pasul. V'chein yita begittin. Shafilu Rabbi Yehuda Mas Yavad Kumas Lakadosh Shem Echad Shenichtav Shlo Lishma Posla Eskarot Sefer Torah Shenichtav Kulan Shlo Lishman. Elsewhere, Masechet Gittin, even Rabbi Yehuda, the man who permitted you to take a stylus to go over Yud, then a Hey, then the other two, right, to finish the name of Hashem, said that if you wrote a whole Sefer Torah that way, you would not be allowed to go and find every Azkara, every time it says Shem Hashem, and go over it again. Why not? Shem Yavir Kumas Al Kol HaAzkarat Mechse Kimenumar. The Torah will look not nice. It will look spotted. It will look dirty, smudged, upasul. That's not good anymore. Menumar pasul mishum shechisaron noihu. Said Rav Soloveitchik. Muchach mizeh. We learned from this. Ki lifamim chisaron noi posel b'di'avad. we find that at times there is actually a lack of beauty in something that itself can destroy the integrity of this mitzvah object. What we have to understand, he says, is Mao Yisod Psul Shel Chisaron Noi. What is it? Seems there are classic Rav Soloveitchik, classic House of Brisk, Tzvei Dinim, two different halachot about when we will and how we will apply the notion of ve'anvehu, beautify Hashem through the mitzvot, and the beauty of mitzvot themselves. So there's Aleph and Bet. Aleph, halacha shel noi she'eino mesuyam, a non-specific halacha about beauty. Klamar, yeshchil bichlal hitnaot lefanav b'mitzvot v'lasat mitzvot ba'ofen mehudar. Should do it in a beautiful way. Umnam din zehu eder mitzvah. V'noi she'eino katsuv mesuyam. This is a general statement. Be beautiful with the mitzvot, you know? And it's a very nice idea. There's no limit. There's no specificity either. Yesh lahader. It's not something that has destroyed the integrity. There's no blemish on the object per se. Doesn't make it possible per se. That's the one for lechatchila. That's what we're talking about. That's on that list. Bram, however, Ein kan psul. There's no psul if you hadn't reached that standard. Ki hachafza eino bal mum. You didn't do anything wrong to the object itself. Yesh chovel hitnaot. You should beautify it. There's an obligation. Achanoi eino katsuv umesuyam. It's not delimited. It's not specific. Achevet tzarich liot na'ayot mechevet zacher. It look nice in other objects, right? Bram yesh chafatz mechem yoter neim mechevet zeh. However, there may be objects that are even nicer than the object that you have. Doesn't matter. Some absolute sense. You're missing noi, kibal mum, and that's a blemish. It's still nice relative to it's still nice enough, yeah? But then there's another kind of chisaron noi, and that's the chisaron noi gamur. It's not related to noi at all. Now it's taken out. It's a bal mum. You've destroyed the object. Even b'diavad, this will destroy it. Yavesh l'rashi ofechet halulav lebal mum. The object is blemished. It can't be used. It doesn't have its basic beauty. L'fichach lulav yavesh pasol. The minute you're going to go through every single time since you gave up, and you're going to, scratch on top of it, you destroy the noi of it. It means smudged, or in this case, spotted, smudged. It's like this. It doesn't look nice anymore, right? Rabbi Yehuda v'Chachamim in the world of Sefer Torah, cholkim im mum zeh. Chal b'shem echad or davke be'avard kumus al kol ha'azkar shel Sefer Torah. The chiluk between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim about a Sefer Torah is how many times do you get to do that? Rabbi Yehuda says you can do it once. Some say no, 0 times. As soon as you've gone over the word with the kumus, that's no good. Midach gis on the other side, din eged halulav and nichlal b'noy ma'akev b'diavad ela b'noy arishon b'noy she'enu katsuv hadarush l'chatchila b'chol ha'mitzvot. Right, so the tying up your lulav, because Rabbi Yehuda said you should, and the Rabbanan say it's a mitzvah, it's not liikuva. That's a nice thing to do. We saw later on in the Mishnah, right? Nifredu olav kasher. It's spread apart like a broom, right? It came apart like a broom, but it came apart like this. It's attached on the bottom. That's still kosher. Well, lefichach din ha'eged belulav hu chova lechatchila lefi Rabbanan aval ein mahaveh din psul. It's not actually going to destroy it. Ki afilu bli ha'eged eina meaning ba'alei mumim. It's still not destroyed, right? Ve'enam chaserim noi legamre k'mo yavesh. The yavesh chaser noi legamre v'nase ba'al mum v'lachein pasel. So this gives us a little bit of a framework, yeah? Sometimes it means one thing, sometimes it's another one. Now,
yeah, right.
You should be asking a $64,000 question. Who wants to ask it?
I don't know if it's a 64,000 or 62 cents, but I have a question.
Go.
It says creates hadar.
Right.
Does not hadar could mean an adjective to eitz, how do we know it's not an adjective, but is actually part of the name, specifically that it's a date palm?
Wait a second. Okay, wait. So pre-eitz hadar actually refers to the etrog. Don't forget.
I'm sorry.
The hadar.
Pre-eitz hadar is referencing the etrog.
My mistake.
The problem was, and this was Tosfot's question, going back to it over here, is that later on, just a couple pages from now, page 31a, the Gemara itself uses this line. It's in quotes over here on the screen. Just as an etrog requires hadar, so too does the lulav require hadar. So the Tosfot say, well, where do you think they got the notion of hadar for the lulav? Obviously, from the pasuk that we know and love in Parshat Emor, pre-eitz hadar, but Rashi says, no. Right? Rashi says, what do these words mean? Ma etrog by hadar, af lulav by hadar. Just as an etrog requires hadar, how do we know that that's true? Because pre-eitz hadar, so too, the lulav requires hadar, but you know where that source is? That source is from Zekeli Van Velo.
But I don't understand. What is the source that pre-eitz hadar means etrog?
I mean, the Torah says pre-eitz hadar, and we have a Masorah. I think, if I answer your question correctly, we have a Masorah. The Rambam writes in Hakdama the Perek Mishnayot, we literally have a tradition, generation to generation, that's an etrog.
It actually 4 positive qualities, I think, that makes the Torah.
Right. So if I could fill out the picture and complicate the picture all at the same time, look what Rashi did with the word hadar on the Torah. Where am I? Here, this one. So here's Lukabi pre-eitz hadar, a beautiful fruit from a tree. Rashi wrote pre-eitz hadar, eitz sheptam eitzo kipirio. Pre-eitz, meaning the fruit and the tree are actually with the same taste. I never tasted an etrog tree. I don't know from a botanical perspective what this means, but spiritually, the tree and the fruit taste the same. What do you do with the word hadar? Not hadar like beauty, but hadar like adira, like to dwell. Hadar be'ilano mishana l'shana, that a fruit which is a fruit that appears on the tree from year to year. Vezehu etrog. See Rashi? This is Rashi on the pasuk. Yeah. Which would explain how it is that when it came to I didn't even put it on the screen, did I? I'm talking without putting it on the screen. I'm pointing and pointing. Your eyes are all so polite. Sorry. I'm pointing and pointing. This is it. See Rashi, pre-eitz hadar, eitz kipirio, tree and fruit are the same taste. And then Rashi writes, hadar bi'ilano mishana l'shana, it dwells. The word dar here is not hadar like beauty, but hadar, that which dwells on its tree from year to year, and that is an etrog. And I just pointed out the Rambam notes that people bandy about the word etrog as if there's like some book of botanical, species. Oh, that's the etrog, and that's what we should be using, and that's what the Torah meant. The Rambam writes, it's a Masorah. It's a great example. Like the only way you really know is because your great grandfather showed you this is what an etrog is. Yeah, there are standards in Shas, etc. But like, how do you tease out what it is? Kapot tamarim, we know what a tamar is. We know it's a date palm because it has dates on it. So that's a date palm. So that's the branch from it. Yeah. Not so.
How come he doesn't comment on the fact that like it happened this year when it says Lakachtem Bayom Arishon this year, Shabbos, we don't take it.
Right. That's coming up. That's in chapter 4.
But they did in the Beit HaMikdash, didn't they? On the first day?
They did.
That's coming up.
They did.
Anyway, we've definitely run out of time because we're coming up on 9 o'clock. So I wanted to go further with the piece from the Rav. Let me just sum up. Tonight, what we saw is the pasuk. We saw the Gemara that we needed to see in order to appreciate that. We didn't even get to applying step number 2 in the introduction. I didn't start the Gemara at all. But the Gemara's first question is going to be like, this Mishnah, are these standards for all 7 days, or are these standards just for the first day, since everyone agrees that's from the Torah, yet the other 6 days today, at least, nowadays at least, is the Rabbanan. Maybe the standard is lowered. There's no such distinction in the Mishnah. Then we started learning through the Mishnah. We pointed out already there's some strangeness about the organization of it. I didn't really answer that question yet. You got to come back next week. God willing, we'll have a shiur next Monday night. And we saw inside that we saw Rashi, why Lulav comes first. Pnei Yeshua I mentioned. We saw Rashi on Yavesh, that it's somehow related to Zekeli Van Vehu, some kind of general principle. Tosfot criticizing Rashi, thinking that the word Hadar for Tosfot is pre-eitz Hadar, and therefore the rest of the pasuk, obviously, it should also be Hadar. But Rashi says, no, the word Hadar means something else. Etrog needs to be Hadar, and Lulav needs to be Hadar. You know why they need to be Hadar? Because Zekeli Van Vehu. Asks the Rav, how could that be when we see, as Jeff pointed out, the Rav didn't know Jeff Burns, but I don't think he knew you, right? But the Rav pointed out, that's not really true if you didn't beautify your mitzvah. Oh, but there are cases like that. Like what? The name of Hashem not written correctly. You want to go back and fix it? Nothing doing, according to the Chachamim. You're going to destroy the beauty of the Sefer Torah. And at other times we see that the Hitnar Lefan of the mitzvah means you should try. That's the gold standard. You didn't make the grade, you still perform the mitzvah. So what's the difference? The Rav said there are tzvei dinim, there are two different types of noi in a mitzvah. Noi, which is an enhancement of an existing mitzvah, noi, which is integral to the standard of the mitzvah. What we need to still answer for, which we will not get to tonight, and that's going on in the piece with the Rav, is that a question of, why didn't Rashi just go in for what was clearly very obvious, which is to just connect Hadar and Hadar. And we'll see further along that his answer, we'll have to for next time, is going to be related to the question of Yom Tov Sheni versus Yom Tov Rishon. To that distinction and the notion that Hadar could only apply as a real standard on the first day, wouldn't do the other 6 days, but Hadar, if Hadar is from Zekeli Van Vehu, so anytime you're doing the mitzvah, it should obtain. And you would need to have that standard. We'll go more into it next week. That's all we have time for tonight. We're going tonight. Grandpa Chaim ben Avraham Shmariel, Grandpa Chaim Kilson from Gavriel Chaim is named. Someone a closing comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask if you could email out that one page from Rav Soloveitchik.
2 pages, by all means.
Thanks.
Yeah. I have a quick question with Gracious coming up. Is the fact that the tree and the etrog taste alike one of the reasons behind the medrash that Eitz Hadat Tov Ra was an etrog tree?
Related. Yeah. But that's too far afield from our discussion about the halacha of Lulav HaGazul, so I'll have to leave it for now.